Tonight, Nova tells the true story of dogs. How did a fierce wolf become a playful puppy? Many dogs have floppy ears, tails that turn up and curl, patchy coats of many colors. These aren't things you see on wolves, which makes sense because none of them would help a wolf survive in the wild. It's been suggested that humans consciously bred for these traits. Ray Coppinger thinks that's more nonsense.
What do? You start selecting for a tail. You know, each generation of tail is going up inch by inch until it gets to the top. And while the tail is going up, the ears are coming down centimeter by centimeter until they're up ears, you know, and so on. From a genetic point of view, I got to have a mechanism. I got to have something there. And believe it or not, for forever, it's been a mystery.
Traits like coat color or the way a dog carries its ears or tail are determined by its genes. Genes are pieces of DNA, and they often come in subtly different versions. Every dog gets one copy of every gene from mom and one from dad. These genes can be mixed and matched in countless ways, but if the parents don't have it, the pup can't get it. And that's what makes curly tails and patchy coats in dogs so mysterious. Wolves don't have them. It took a remarkable experiment in a most unlikely place to solve this mystery. The place was the middle of nowhere Siberia, and the experimenter was an out-of-favor Russian geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev. Local fox farmers had asked Belyaev for help in breeding a less vicious animal. Belyaev began with the tamest foxes he could find. From their offspring, and for many generations thereafter, he chose only the tamest for breeding. He'd expected that each new generation would be a little less vicious, a little more tame. But by the 10th generation, he was seeing things he'd never expected.
All of a sudden, his fox ears started down. His fox tail started up. They started to bark, which is not characteristic of foxes. They started to have different coats. All these little features that you can't imagine being in the wild type. I mean, it's not a matter of selecting for them because they're not there to be selected for. That variation isn't there.
What does tameness have to do with ears and barking and coat color? Belyaev and his colleagues immediately went looking for an explanation. They checked the fox's adrenaline levels. That's the hormone that controls the fight or flight response. And they found they were far lower than normal.
That would explain the tameness. They're just not afraid because they're not producing as much adrenaline. But where does the multicolored coat come from? And somebody says right off the bat, hey, adrenaline's on a biochemical pathway that also goes to melanin. It also has something to do with the animal's coat color. So there's a correlation between coat color now and the adrenal gland.
Suddenly, it all started to make sense. As Belyaev bred his foxes for tameness, over the generations, their bodies began producing different levels of a whole range of hormones. These hormones, in turn, set off a cascade of changes that somehow triggered a surprising degree of genetic variation.
Just the simple act of selecting for tameness destabilized the genetic makeup of these animals in such a way that all sorts of stuff that you would never normally see in a wild population suddenly appeared.
Most dog biologists now believe something very similar to what happened to these foxes also happened to a population of wolves more than 10,000 years ago. And the rest, as they say, is history.